The Mexican circuit has always been one very similar to Baku or Monaco in that I haven't really enjoyed it overly much. But things are different in F124 as there seems to be a lot more grip and the track really flows this year. Creating a car setup for this track is all about dialing as much rotation into the car as possible without it becoming unstable and hard to drive. There are so many slow and tight corners from turns 4 and 5 to the double right-hander of turn 6 and the tight and twisty stadium section. Being able to rotate the car well at slow speeds can really improve your lap times. You may think that the sheer number of slow speed corners will result in a higher downforce car setup than I've actually recommended. I've set the front wing to 35 and the rear to just 22. Much like tracks such as Baku or Kota, Mexico has an incredibly long straight that does limit how much downforce you can run. So I've set the wing angles low enough to be competitive down that straight, but the more important aspect of creating an aero setup here is creating a big gap between the front and rear of the car. This will allow your car to pivot well into those slower corners and remain responsive. For the transmission, I've set the on-throttle differential fairly high. This track is dependent on slow speed traction, so 60% may seem a little bit high. However, you actually have quite a lot of mechanical grip at this track, so you can run a higher on-throttle differential setup without encountering too much wheel spin. If you do find yourself sliding out of some of those slower corners, first try to open up your steering on the exit. You can use a lot of track and a lot of curb around Mexico, and this can really help limit wheel spin. Alternatively, you can also lower your on-throttle differential. I have then set the off-throttle diff to 55%, and this is relatively high, but it's necessitated by the high engine braking of 80%. Higher engine braking setups require higher off-throttle differential setups. For the geometry, I've kept everything far left. That means running the camber at its highest negative angle to give us great grip mid-corner, which is very useful through turns 7 to 11, which is incredibly fast. The lack of any toe will help reduce drag and increase our top speed along that pit straight, and it will also limit tyre wear, which can be a big problem at this track. When it comes to the suspension setup, responsiveness is key. I've set the front suspension high at 40 and the rear to just 6. This, combined with anti-roll bars of 19 and 15, will result in a car that is very willing to change direction and go where you point it. This track is pretty smooth, however you will want to attack the curbs a lot, which leads to a slightly higher than liked ride height. Setting this to 25 and 58 gives us a little leeway when riding up and over the curbs and avoids bottoming out. With the brakes, I'd recommend our normal approach of 100% pressure and 55% bias. Lockups aren't too much of an issue, but you can actually encounter some rear locking at some corners, so 55% provides a good balance. Now I did mention it earlier, but Mexico is punishing on tyres, and there are some fast corners which really stress the front tyres, and plenty of slower corners that can wear your rears. For this reason, I've maxed out all pressures other than the front right tyre, which I have lowered to 28.5, and that will complete this car setup for Mexico. This is a track that has really grown on me this year, and is much easier to drive than it was in last year's game. The main thing to really push your lap times is to utilise the whole width of the track. Attacking the inside curbs and using the curves on the outside, and building in that safety net with the slightly higher ride height can really find you a good amount of lap time. Now I'm going to head straight off and work on our Brazil car setup, and I will see you guys on track.